Finally, let's take a look at the letter D, the last principle, which is dependency inversion. And in this case, Wikipedia gives a long description, but basically what you need to know is these two things. So high-level modules should not depend on low-level modules, both should depend on abstractions, interfaces. So again, we're back to interfaces. And also those abstractions, interfaces, should not depend on details, on some other classes. And here's an exact example, and this time it won't be my code, it will be a repository of Stefan Zweifel called Screenly, publicly available on GitHub, which is a tool to create website screenshots through a simple API. And inside of that code, I have it listed on my website laravelexamples.com, which is also available for free. In one part of that code, there's a capture service to actually capture the screenshot. And this is how it looks. So this browser capture, and browser is dynamic. Browser can be Chrome browser, can be for testing in-memory browser, or maybe some other browser in the future. And that browser is passed to that service via constructor, and that can capture screenshot is actually an interface. It's not an exact class of the browser, it's an interface. If we go up to the actual classes of those browsers, there is a Chrome browser, which actually does the browser shot and saves the actual screenshot, and it implements can capture screenshot interface. And also there's an in-memory browser, which is used mostly for testing, but with ability to have any other browser, testing browser in the future, which would also implement the same can capture screenshot interface. And that interface is just with one method called capture, with parameters that need to be strictly under those rules, right? And then the method that calls that browser, which is we're back to this one, should not depend on the browser itself, but instead it should depend on the interface, on the abstraction as the principle called. And then somewhere in the logic of Laravel, it should resolve which browser to use. In fact, it's happening in a file called Screenly Service Provider, which is general service provider in Laravel. It could be custom service provider, it could be actually in the app service provider. It's binding can capture screenshot interface to the specific class, which is Chrome browser. So for the application, the Chrome browser is automatically used and resolved by service provider. But if we take a look at another file called API screenshot test for the automated test, in this case, there's another binding happening. So for testing, we're binding interface to in-memory browser, which is exactly the point. So the class of actually capturing screenshot, it doesn't really know which browser to use. It is passed here via dependency injection, and then it is flexible. Then, if we go back to Wikipedia page, abstraction should not depend on details. So abstraction of the interface doesn't know anything about implementation of that interface. And then both should depend on abstractions. Both of those in memory and Chrome browser depend on the interface. So this is a solid principle D letter implemented in an open source project.